Hey guys, how's it going? This is the Moza Aircross 2, and it's pretty impressive on paper. This isn't a video showcasing the creative shots that I can do, but instead I'll share with you an in-depth look at this device and talk about the things that they've done well and some things that they haven't. Like other products on this channel, I've purchased this with my own money, so I can experience the same things you would if you were to purchase it. Welcome back to another review from Reviews for Life. Here we go. Inside the box, we get a little overwhelmed with all the stuff that they include. The basic package has everything you need, and the Pro package, which is what I have here, also includes a follow focus motor, Aircross Swiss plate, and a phone holder. The manual's definitely an interesting read, reminding you to remove the batteries from the open fire immediately. Build quality is completely fine, and everything feels pretty sturdy. Looking around, we have the charging port, and on the other side, we have a CAN port and a USB-C communications port. Now, the CAN port is used for attaching a slider, which can be purchased separately. At the top, by the tilt motor, we have the camera ports and two more CAN ports for iFocus wheels on the other side. One thing that's done really well is this battery and compartment. I just want to take a moment to really admire the engineering behind it. Rather than adding a dedicated charging port on the gimbal, they just reuse the port that's on the battery and install a rubber flap. This reduces the ports and allows the battery to be charged both inside the gimbal and standalone. The charging LEDs are also reused through the see-through window, and it's really quite clever. Oh, if you do run out of battery, the gimbal can be used while charging, so that's a plus from me. Interface-wise, there's a thumb dial, joystick, and a wheel. What's interesting is that the wheel can actually toggle the power. I think mine is just a lemon, so leave a comment on how yours behaves. Onto the setup. The manual is pretty useless here, so I've linked a video in the description on how to do it. There's one minor issue though. If you have an SL3 like me, you'll find that the arm actually doesn't clear the motor after balancing, so you won't be able to fold up the gimbal nicely during travel. Since this is my first gimbal, I wrongly assumed that I would get 360-degree rotation for all the motors. The manual doesn't talk about it, and perhaps it's common knowledge, but I was in the dark until I dug into the specs. And right here, it states clearly that it's only designed for 45 degrees. Looking at specs from DJI, their motors also have mechanical limitations. So what exactly happens when you hit that limit? Well, in this case, the gimbal starts shaking and then goes into sleep mode, or it just recovers when you move it back. I'm currently using firmware 1.06, so maybe down the line, they'll improve upon this. Now, one thing I notice is that while auto-tuning the gimbal, I find the settings to be quite aggressive. On my Canon SL3 with a 24mm prime, it weighs in at about 753 grams, or 25% of the max advertised load. The motor's power is set to 70, 187 for the tilt, roll, and pan respectively. I would have expected them to run at maybe 30%, but hey, we'll stick with it. Okay, let's do some actual footage. At first, I thought the roll motor limitation was going to be a deal breaker, but turns out I was wrong. Walking shots are steady, and everything looks really smooth. It's definitely night and day compared to hand-holding. Now, I can't say this is a complete review without looking at the rest of the things that they include. The manual is actually pretty useful here, and the chart they provide shows what camera matches with what cable. It's actually super convenient to have the basic camera functions right here from the gimbal. For those who got the iFocus motor, it's not that great. Brandon has a good video explaining why, which I've linked in the description below. The Bluetooth is just another way to interface with the gimbal and has some pretty cool effects such as time-lapse, remote control, and inception. The one complaint is that the instructions are pretty much non-existent, so you just have to spend some time to figure them out. Now, the last feature I want to talk about is this phone tracking. And I definitely spent way too much time trying to get this to work. because it just has so much potential. Here's my list of complaints. First of all, the gimbal really doesn't do well with top-heavy mounts. During balancing, if you release the camera to check the balance, the phone will land directly onto the roll motor with a loud whack. True story. I'm not making this up. Because of this, you'll need some counterweights. Remember the original motor strength of 70, 187? Well, now it's 95, 194. This is weird because my new setup with the phone and counterweights weighs in at 1100 grams, which is about 1/3 of the 3 kilogram limit. And here's some cell phone footage. It works pretty well, but loses targets when there's occlusion or fast motion. The gimbal tries to keep the target in the center and relies on the phone's autofocus. Oh, you do lose out on 90 degrees of range of motion because of the phone. Also, and perhaps the biggest downside, is that if you're a solo YouTuber thinking of using this gimbal to track yourself remotely, don't bother because you can't select the target while you're in front of the camera. Personally, I think it's a half-baked solution and is just a checkbox feature for Moza's marketing team. Now, just for kicks, I wanted to put the 3 kilogram limit to the test. After disassembling my phone setup, I threw on some metal and here it is. It's janky, but hey, it weighs in at 2.85 kilograms, which is good enough for what I need. I intentionally try to keep the moment of inertia low, so everything is near the center of gravity, except for that long bar, which I guess can simulate a lens. The result? Well, everything works fine as long as you don't do any quick movements. And here's some footage. As you can see, the gimbal not only reacts slowly, but also overshoots when moving. When I twist the handle, it slowly accelerates, overshoots, and finally returns back to the correct position. Now, just for comparison, here's a demonstration of the same, except with just the camera. Notice how there's none of that overshoot business, and it works properly here. This is because the motors are simply too weak to handle all 3 kilograms. If I wanted to use a heavier lens, such as the Sigma 24-70, which weighs in about 1 kilogram, then I think the gimbal will have a really hard time. Again, it's another one of those things that sort of works on paper, but really isn't that realistic. So what are my final thoughts on this gimbal? Well, if you want steady video footage, then this will definitely meet your requirements. The gimbal is responsive and doesn't have any noticeable drifting as long as you aren't near the motor's limits. In other words, it works. But that's really just the bare minimum. If you look beyond the basics, well, this gimbal just tries too hard to do too many things and makes everything feel unpolished. Simply, it overpromises and underdelivers. So for that, I can't recommend it. But if you really want to get one, then I would stick with the base model since the eye focus and the camera holder aren't super impressive. All right, that's it from me. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this content, consider liking and subscribing. Stay classy, YouTube, and I'll see you in the next one.